There is a silent, invisible wall that stands between where you are right now and the life you were actually meant to live. It isn't made of bricks or steel, but of mathematics and psychological gravity. Most people spend their entire lives throwing themselves against this wall, only to fall back, exhausted and broke, convinced that the game is rigged. They see the wealthy gliding effortlessly across the finish line and assume it was luck or inheritance or some dark secret. But the truth is far more clinical and yet far more hopeful. The most difficult thing you will ever do in your financial life is not making $1 million. It is making the first 100,000. It is the great filter of the human experience. It is the point where most dreams go to die, not because they weren't good dreams, but because the dreamer didn't understand the physics of the departure. Think of a rocket sitting on a launch pad. To break the bonds of Earth's gravity, that rocket must burn 90% of its fuel in the first few minutes of flight. Once it reaches the vacuum of space, it can travel thousands of miles with nothing more than a tiny thruster. Wealth is exactly the same. The beginning requires a violent, sustained explosion of effort, discipline, and sacrifice. It feels like you are burning everything you have just to move an inch. And that is exactly where the trap is set. When you are starting from zero, or worse, from the suffocating debt of a past you didn't even enjoy, the math of money is your enemy. You save your first $1,000 and you feel a flicker of pride. You put it into the market and a year later, it has grown by $70. You look at that $70 and you feel a wave of cold cynicism wash over you. You think about the nights you stayed in while your friends were out. You think about the old car you're still driving. You think about the cheap meals and the skipped vacations. And for what? $70. That's not a fortune, that's a rounding error. That's the price of a decent dinner. This is the moment of maximum danger. This is where the brain, wired for immediate survival, begins to whisper lies. It tells you that the sacrifice isn't worth the reward. It tells you that you might as well spend the money now and enjoy your youth, because the wealthy life is a mirage that is moving away from you faster than you can run. What your brain doesn't tell you is that you are currently in the muscle phase. You are building a foundation in the dark, and foundations aren't meant to be beautiful. They are meant to be strong enough to hold the weight of a skyscraper. The first 100,000 is a test of character disguised as a financial milestone. It is the period where you are the sole engine of your progress. Every cent in your account is a direct result of your labor, your sweat, and your no. In this phase, you are an employee of your future self, and the pay is terrible. You are working two jobs, the one that pays your bills and the one where you manage your capital. But something miraculous happens as you approach that six-figure mark. The physics of the universe begin to bend in your favor. Suddenly, that 7% return isn't $70 anymore. It's $7,000. And $7,000 is a different kind of animal. That is a sum of money that can actually change the trajectory of a year. That is the moment where a silent architect enters the room. You realize that while you were sleeping, while you were working, while you were living your life, your money went out and worked a shift for you. It brought back a paycheck that you didn't have to bleed for. This is the crossover point, the sacred threshold where capital begins to outperform labor. Most people never see this because they are blinded by the comparison trap. We live in a world designed to keep us in the muscle phase forever. Every advertisement, every social media post, every new and improved product is a calculated attempt to siphon off your fuel before you can reach escape velocity. Society wants you to be a high earner, but it doesn't want you to be wealthy. A wealthy person is dangerous because they are free. A person who lives paycheck to paycheck, even a high-earning one, is a servant to the system. To get to 100K, you have to be willing to look poor to people who are actually broke. You have to be okay with being the outlier. Let's talk about the raw, visceral reality of the grind. It is lonely. It is the season of the slog. You will watch people with half your intellect and twice your debt drive cars they can't afford and take photos in places they haven't earned. You will feel the sting of FOMO in the pit of your stomach. But you must realize that they are burning their furniture to keep the house warm. They are destroying their future sovereignty for a moment of temporary status. You, on the other hand, are building a fortress. The first 100K is not about the money, it's about the identity shift. By the time you reach that number, you have killed the consumer inside of you and birthed the investor. You have learned how to delay gratification, how to analyze risk, and how to stand your ground against the tide of societal expectations. You have developed a financial callus. When the market drops 20% and the headlines are screaming about the end of the world, the person with 5K panics because that's their only safety net. The person who has ground their way to 100K looks at the screen with the eyes of a predator. They know that a fire sale is the fastest way to the next 100K. Why is the second 100,000 so much easier? Because you aren't doing it alone anymore. You have a team. Every dollar you saved in the first phase is now a tiny soldier standing on the front lines for you. They don't get tired. They don't need health insurance. They don't have egos. They just replicate. The math that felt like a crawl at the beginning starts to feel like a sprint. The climb from 100K to 200K often takes half the time of the first 100K. The move from 500K to a million can happen in the blink of an eye during a bull market. But you cannot get to the sprint if you refuse to do the crawl. There is a deep psychological piece that comes with hitting this milestone. It is the freedom of the floor. When you have 6 figures in liquid assets, the world looks different. You don't have to tolerate a toxic boss because you are afraid of missing a car payment. You don't have to stay in a dead-end city because you can't afford the move. You have FU money in its most embryonic form. It isn't enough to retire, but it is enough to breathe. It is enough to know that if the world goes sideways tomorrow, you have a buffer that can buy you months or years of time. And time is the only currency that actually matters. We often hear about the millionaire next door, but we rarely talk about the 6-figure grind that got them there. We want the end result without the middle muddle. We want the harvest without the winter. But the winter is where the roots grow deep. If you are currently in that winter, if you are looking at your modest savings and feeling like it's a drop in the ocean, I want you to change your perspective. You aren't saving money, you are buying blocks of your life back. Every $500 you put away is a day of your life that you will eventually own outright. Every $10,000 is a month of absolute freedom. When you look at it that way, the sacrifice isn't a burden, it's a trade. You are trading a coffee you'll forget in an hour for a piece of your soul that you'll own for a decade. You are trading a car that will be a heap of scrap metal in 15 years for a financial engine that will feed your grandchildren. The path to 100K requires a brute force approach. In the later stages of wealth, you can be subtle. You can use tax strategies, complex derivatives, and sophisticated hedging. But at the start, those things are distractions. You need the hammer. You need to increase your income by any means necessary, upskilling, side hustles, or relentless career pivoting. And you need to protect that income with a ferocity that borders on the obsessive. You must treat every windfall like a gift from the heavens to be guarded, not a reason to celebrate. Inflation is the ghost that haunts this conversation. People say 100K isn't what it used to be. They are right. In the 1970s, 100K was a kingdom. Today, in some cities, it's a down payment. But this is exactly why you cannot afford to wait. If the wall is getting higher, you need to start climbing sooner. If the current is getting stronger, you need to swim harder. Using inflation as an excuse to not save is like refusing to wear a seatbelt because the car might still crash. It's a logical fallacy born out of fear. The higher the cost of living, the more critical it is that you have capital working for you. I want you to visualize the moment you cross that line. You open your account and the number starts with a 1 followed by 5 zeros. You will expect to feel different, but you won't, not at first. You'll still be the same person. You'll still have the same problems. But as the days pass, a subtle shift will occur. You'll find yourself standing a little taller in meetings. You'll find yourself speaking with more clarity because you aren't desperate. You'll find that your internal weather is no longer tied to the whims of your employer. You have reached the wealth acceleration point. From here, the game changes. You can move from brute force to optimization. You can start thinking about asset allocation, tax efficiency, and legacy. You can afford to be patient. You can afford to wait for the right opportunity instead of jumping at the first thing that looks like a paycheck. The first 100K is the price of admission to the real world. Everything before that is just the rehearsal. If you are discouraged, remember that the most intense heat happens right before the metal melts. The most difficult miles are the ones right before the summit. The B word that Munger used isn't just about the difficulty, it's about the sheer, unadulterated persistence required to not give up when the results are invisible. You are not failing, you are incubating. You are not standing still, you are gathering the mass required to start the slide. The world is full of people who stopped at 20K. People who got a taste of the struggle and decided it was too hard, so they bought a jet ski and accepted a life of quiet desperation. Do not be one of them. Do not let the 90% trap catch you. The majority of people will spend their entire lives working for money because they never had the courage to make money work for them. They chose the comfort of the moment over the sovereignty of a lifetime. You have a choice to make today. You can keep pushing that boulder sideways, or you can commit to the vertical climb. It will be steep. It will be exhausting. It will make you question your sanity. But once you reach that plateau, once you reach that first 100,000, you will look down and realize that the gravity that once held you back is now the wind at your back. You will realize that you didn't just build a bank account, you built a person who is capable of achieving anything. This isn't about greed. It's about the fundamental human right to be free. It's about the ability to look at your children and tell them that their future isn't for sale. It's about the ability to contribute to your community and your world from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. Money is a terrible master, but it is a magnificent servant. And the first 100K is the training school where you learn how to be the master. So stop looking for the shortcut. Stop looking for the one weird trick that will make you rich overnight. Embrace the brutality of the start. Lean into the boredom of the basics. Do the work that no one else is willing to do so that you can live the life that no one else gets to live. The first 100K is waiting for you. It is a grueling, magnificent, soul-altering journey. And I promise you with everything I know to be true that when you finally cross that line, you will look back and say it was the best thing you ever did. Your future self is watching you right now. They are cheering for you. They are begging you not to quit. They are waiting for you at the top of that hill, ready to hand you the keys to the kingdom. But you have to get there. You have to endure the muscle phase. You have to survive the great filter. You have to earn your hands on that first 100,000. It's a B word. It's a grind. It's a mountain. But once you reach the top, the view is unlike anything you have ever seen. The noise of the world is loud, but the math is quiet. And the math says that if you stay the course, if you refuse to be distracted by the glitter of the consumer world, and if you keep pouring fuel into your engine, you will reach escape velocity. You will break the bonds of financial gravity. You will enter the vacuum of wealth where every move you make is amplified and every dream you have is within reach. Don't wait for better economy. Don't wait for a raise. Don't wait for permission. Start running today. Run through the doubt. Run through the fatigue. Run until you see that six-figure milestone in the distance, and then don't stop until you've claimed it as your own. This is your life. This is your freedom. And the first 100K is the bridge you must cross to get there. Cross it with conviction. Cross it with courage. And never ever look back. The transformation you are seeking isn't in the destination, it's in the struggle. The person you become while earning that first 100K is the real prize. The money can be lost, the markets can crash, but the discipline, the vision, and the grit you develop during this phase are yours forever. They are the true assets. They are the wealth that cannot be taxed or stolen. So when the road feels long and the progress feels slow, remember the rocket. Remember the fire required to leave the earth. You are in the middle of your launch. It's supposed to be loud. It's supposed to be hot. It's supposed to feel like you're breaking apart. That's just the feeling of becoming something new. That's just the sound of the wall breaking. Keep going. The stars are waiting.